Over to you, Jana.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, thank you for that, Steffi, and thank you for CTAL for organizing this great conference to allow us to reflect on a lot of things that we've all learned over the last year. So I'm going to focus on breakout room discussions in my presentation and what I've learned from this experience. So I have to be quite honest up front with this. This use of breakout rooms kind of came from a state of panic when we were planning about a year ago, not quite knowing exactly how teaching would take place over the coming year. And trying to think of how I was going to manage to keep students engaged. I kind of had visions of students in their pajamas on their beds, just consuming content, binge watching videos, which wasn't kind of ideal in my view. So how do I get them to interact with me on these modules, and how do I kind of cement the learning that I'm kind of passing across in an online environment that wasn't, I couldn't see their faces, I couldn't see their reactions, I couldn't really get any feedback from them. So how do I cement learning in that environment? And I was also concerned about the student experience, and particularly with my cohorts, which were first year students and master students who had just arrived to a new university. I was really kind of acutely aware that they had no friends. They potentially knew no one on their course, and I really wanted to use my module to enhance their experience while with us. And so what I decided to do was to use breakout rooms. And this really came kind of from a creative place rather than from a strategic place. And I started dividing students into groups during my live online lectures and sending them off to carry out some tasks together, and in order to kind of achieve this engagement and this learning. I have to admit the first week was really tricky. A lot of the feedback was kind of, oh, my camera wasn't working. Oh, only 2 of us actually spoke during the discussion. Oh, my internet was a bit flimsy. So the first week was a bit tricky, but I was really open with them, and I carry out feedback every week. And I asked them honestly, said, just let me know if it was really rubbish and I'll scrap it. But enough positive feedback came through in that first week to kind of give me encouragement to keep going. And by the end of the process, so this kind of feedback that you're seeing now was towards the end, they all kind of really were on board, and the feedback I was getting was consistently better every week. It kept improving. So there was definitely something that they were learning, and they were kind of coming on board with the idea of the breakout rooms. I can see from this feedback that they kind of ticked both the learning objectives, but the engagement objectives and the student experience, because they enjoyed it, they learned, and they actually participated in this exercise. And so this kind of is why I decided to present this, the work I've been doing with breakout rooms, because I think that it was really a good success. When it was so overwhelmingly positive, I then decided to look at the literature, of course. So then I went to the literature and was like, obviously this is working for some reason that is not just, abstract. What are the benefits? Why are they enjoying this so much? And I looked into the benefits of peer learning, or collaborative learning, as some people kind of refer to it. And having students work together has a lot of benefits on many, many different dimensions. So first of all, it promotes deeper learning of the subject. So we go beyond just kind of knowing definitions or knowing how to draw graphs or knowing how to solve things, but actually going deeper when students explain things to each other, when students are questioned on their kind of ideas or their beliefs or their explanations, then they have to really link concepts together and go into that deeper level where they learn much more. It develops their skills that they use at university, but skills that are also going to be very beneficial to them out in the workplace. And students value this. They're very acutely aware of this when they learn new things. There's also, I was quite surprised to read, a lot of psychological benefits to peer learning. And these psychological benefits aren't just enjoyed during the process of peer learning itself, but also for their whole experience at university. So there are reduced dropout rates, improved experience of the program, and persevere also after they leave university, and for a longer time period after that. So this is quite, I think, quite amazing thing that we can help facilitate. And my favorite pro or advantage to using peer learning is that actually they don't come to you as often with their problems, because they have a network of students that they can go to first, and they would much rather ask their peers than ask their lecturer or the module convener. And so you get a lot less questions about, oh, how do I do this? Oh, I've done that, but I've submitted the wrong piece of work. How do I change it? Oh, how do I solve this? They kind of troubleshoot between themselves. And the flow of emails that you get in your mailbox from panicked students actually drastically reduces. And so there's a lot of benefits, both to yourself as a module convener, but also to students themselves. So I thought, if I've convinced you at this point that it's something you might want to consider, I thought I'd share what I did in my modules. So as I said, I had 2 cohorts I used this weekly with. With my first years, the kind of system we were in was that we had a lecture that was pre-recorded, so 1 hour of pre-recording content, 1 hour of online live content, and then we had a tutorial for almost the entire semester. In that tutorials where I allocated the breakout room sessions. That tutorial usually was problem set kind of solving tutorial. I kind of changed that, and we had some of that, but I added a lot more kind of discussion ideas because I wanted them to interact. And with my MSc, we usually had just 2 hours of recorded lecture time in a typical year. I just recorded all that content because there was no clean break point, which made sense to kind of divide that. But I added an hour session that was live, and I used breakout rooms for that. I used breakout groups in Blackboard, but there's lots of other platforms that you can use this on. I always pre-prepared handouts so that students worked through the handouts and weren't just aimlessly put into a room to talk. They had something to do. I randomized them weekly, so every week they had different partners, and they got to know each other as a whole cohort this way. And I divided a session into a kind of 15-minute introduction where I went through some concepts I wanted to reinforce, or I answered questions I received by email. I just did kind of my thing for the first 15 minutes. I sent them off for 30 minutes of solid interaction without interruption. And then we did a 15-minute debrief. And the 30-minute solid interaction together with the pre-prepared handouts are the 2 kind of, I think, key factors for success, really. And then I wanted to take my last slide to focus on what I've learned from this experience. I have, first of all, had to acknowledge the importance of peer networks and collaborative learning. I think we often take for granted the fact that students will meet while they're on their degrees. They will meet in waiting room to go into lecture halls. They will meet inside the classroom, and they will meet and form study groups, and they will help each other through the journey. But COVID kind of put a stop to that. And so removing them from that environment meant that it became much more important that we provided that for them. Importance to persevere despite teething issues. The first session is going to feel like it's rubbish. Ask students for their perspective. It will give you courage to keep going, but persevere through that, because you might need to tweak some things. So I gave them 15 minutes in the first session, and that was clearly too little, which is why it went up to 30. But keep getting feedback from them, but I would say don't give up too quickly, because it does take time to kind of find the sweet spot of it. I feel like we have a role to play as module leads to facilitate collaborative learning by setting group coursework, by trying to encourage them to interact. And I am confident that I am able to translate this in a way for next year going forward when we have simultaneous sessions. I'm currently teaching a January start cohort, and we're doing that right now. So I've got half the class online, half the class in the room, and I simultaneously broadcast and send them off into groups and work with the students in the class myself. So it works in different settings. And finally, we're creating so many positive externalities with this by facilitating peer learning. So I really do recommend, if it's possible, because I understand not every module is the same, if it is possible to accommodate it, I would really recommend you give it a shot. And so that's all from me. I think I'm in my time. And thank you very much for listening, everyone, and I look forward to your questions.